Hello and welcome to Hubscale's podcast. Today I'm joined by a very exciting guest, Ryan Disraeli, CEO of Inspectiv. It's lovely to have you on the show today. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thanks. Thank you for having me, Emily.
Of course, of course. Well, it's lovely to have you. Would love to just kind of, just start off by just going into, your background and how you kind of came into this career and how you inevitably started founding.
Yeah, sure. So Inspective is my first startup, and I've been doing startups since I was 19, actually while still in university. I grew up in a family down in San Diego in the United States, and I come from a family of dentists. So my dad was a dentist, his dad was a dentist, his dad was a dentist, and I don't know if they had dentists before then, but if they did. I'm sure it probably goes back even further. Um, and so growing up, really had no interest in kind of like the actual practice of dentistry, but would always talk to my dad about the business side and always had a passion for building things and kind of culture and the entrepreneurship side of it. So was around a little bit of that growing up and ultimately started my first company back while still in university. So I've really been doing this my entire adult life and then a little bit before.
Amazing. Well, I'm sure we'll get on to, your first company and how you founded that in a little bit more detail later, but would love to kind of just kind of, start off with, a little bit on Inspectiv, what kind of problems it's solving at the moment, and essentially where do you foresee it going and taking off really?
Yeah, so Inspective is in the cybersecurity category, and in that category, as you very well know, it can get quite convoluted in terms of the subcategories, and there's a lot of overlap.
Hmm.
It's really hard to kind of pick like a specific subcategory, but we think of ourselves primarily in application security. With a little bit, you can make some arguments that we're in vulnerability management and a couple other categories as well, but essentially, the problem that we're trying to solve is make application security um, more effective and work better for the mid-market. A lot of the tools that are out there have been designed for enterprise and really don't work very well for most companies that are building apps. And so, the core product that Inspective started with is bug bounty, and it's probably the perfect example for this because bug bounty in itself provides a lot of promise. And for folks that are listening that maybe don't know a lot about having a bug bounty platform, essentially how it works is we have a platform where researchers around the world are hunting for vulnerabilities and bugs across our customer base. And when they discover one, they are paid out a bounty based off the criticality of that finding. And the promise of that sounds really great. You have access to, tens of thousands of researchers, different specialized skill sets, um, folks that are continuously testing. So in theory, you have 24 by 7 coverage, the ability to find net new novel vulnerabilities, find things that maybe aren't covered across a pen test or picked up across a scanner or other tools, and ideally find a vulnerability before a bad actor does. So that promise is really, really great. But for most companies, it really doesn't deliver on that because there's also kind of a pain of running a bug bounty program of the great parts of having access to tens of thousands of researchers also means the complexity of working with 10,000, plus people across the globe in different languages and different skill sets. The ability to triage things, the amount of noise that comes in that isn't real, that aren't valid findings. And so you have all of these different kind of complexities. And so we've been trying to take like the best parts of these different application security, tools and make them easier to use, easier to consume, and package them in a more elegant way than what has been previously available on the market.
Mhm. Amazing. And how is that, kind of going at the moment and how do you kind of foresee it over the next few years kind of evolving and really kind of taking shape within the market?
Yeah, sure. So it's going very well. The company is growing, and yeah, we're having this success and good
Yeah.
validation in the market.
Hmm.
Um, I think we've made it a couple minutes without mentioning AI, and
Yeah.
I think that which is maybe a record for a podcast, but I look at AI being really an accelerator here, and I
Hmm.
mean in many ways it's a strength, it's a weakness, it's an opportunity, it's a threat, it's all of the above, and adds complexity, but. One of the beauties of what Inspective does is we rely a lot on manual processes because we believe that having researchers and having people in the loop is how we're going to continue to evolve and continue to find novel vulnerabilities and provide value to our customers. But as part of that, there's still a lot of processes that exist today in our platform that require a lot of people and a lot of manual process. And the problem isn't that it requires people, it's that it can take time. And so, for example, we get, sometimes a submission from a researcher that can take 10 hours to validate and make sure that it's legitimate. And so for us, really, I think the next evolution and what we've already been launching and continue to build is how can we leverage technology to continue to provide value to customers faster and make that process more efficient. And over time, that means that we can make our product more accessible to more companies because it's easier. Hopefully, we can deliver it at a lower price point over time, et cetera. So I think we've gotten a lot of validation on our model, on the need for better application security across the mid-market. And luckily, a lot of the technology investments that we have made and are making will continue to drive towards that ambition and towards that
Hmm.
ultimate goal.
Of course. And obviously, you mentioned the AI piece, obviously the very hot topic at the minute. Do you kind of foresee AI coming into play within Inspective in how you operate as well as kind of in your product and solution as well? Or how does that kind of component fit in with Inspective now and kind of in the future?
We do absolutely, absolutely. And I look at it, I think we're in a very nice position because a lot of companies out there I mean, everyone has limited resources. And so a lot of folks are figuring out how do we, where do we leverage AI? And sometimes there's trade-offs where you can leverage AI to you know, make more efficient processes and automations and use agents to do things that people were doing. And sometimes doing those things means that maybe you're not leveraging your resources to build AI directly into the product and create like true like intellectual property and differentiation. And for us, we sit in a pretty unique spot where we can do both of those at the same time.
Hmm.
And so our core AI use case that we're innovating on is figuring out how to improve the triage process for
Hmm.
findings. And so it is not a trivial process anytime a researcher across the globe submits a finding. We have to determine whether it's within scope, whether it's been discovered before, whether it's reproducible. Oftentimes, there's a lot of back and forth with researchers to have them append different, pieces of evidence to maybe clarify a piece that was in their initial submission. And so there are a lot of parts of that process that add a lot of time, and ultimately add risk because the longer that it takes to triage, the longer that a vulnerability is open before we can share that finding with the customer and they can remediate, that adds a bit of risk. And so there are a lot of opportunities to add, agents to help improve that process,
Hmm.
and ultimately help us deliver to our customers faster.
Hmm.
And the great part about that is as we're building that IP, it is also making us more efficient on our side as well. So we're able to kind of do both of those things. One, drive more efficiency, improve process, but at the same time, build really interesting intellectual property that will help create value for the company longer term, but more importantly, deliver value to our customers faster.
Hmm. Amazing. And how do you kind of foresee AI changing not only just the cyber landscape, but also kind of the application security space? Like, do you see there being a big shift in that, or what do you kind of, foresee it happening over the next, 6 months, a year, 2 years?
Yeah, sure. So I look at it from a couple different perspectives.
Mhm.
One is that AI is enabling more applications being built.
Yeah.
People are using vibe coding, low code, like, I'm building my own apps and I probably have no business doing that at this point.
Yeah.
And folks out there that aren't engineers that are building apps. And so there's a awesome opportunity there. And I think
Hmm.
that's really great.
Hmm.
But the reality is also that security isn't necessarily in mind with a lot of that. And so I think we're seeing more applications, probably more applications with less great security. So that's increasing the number of vulnerabilities, and AI is a big driver of that.
Hmm.
So that's probably one key data point for us. And then another one, which is kind of interesting, is that what we're seeing from the researcher side is, our researchers are crowdsourced community across the world. And what we're seeing is that they are using AI, which is great. Like we
Hmm.
want them to be using, all the best tools out there to find novel vulnerabilities, and they're doing that. And they probably can move at a fast speed to continue to innovate and evolve in terms of finding vulnerabilities. But one of the challenges we're seeing is that they're also using LLMs to submit vulnerabilities,
Hmm.
and that can be great, but that can also mean more noise because vulnerabilities all that are being submitted from our researchers, um, they look like they're legitimate. They're written in perfect English. They're like
Hmm.
formatted great. They can have like be 10 times longer in terms of the write-up than what we got before. And so
Hmm.
researchers are, they should, using a lot of these tools to enhance their findings, to, augment them with more information. And that's really great. We encourage them to do that. But that's also creates more complexity on our side for how to
Hmm.
determine whether a finding is real, whether it's legitimate, whether we can reproduce it, or is this just a write-up that looks really, really great, but it's for something that's not that important and not,
Hmm.
not that significant. And so kind of as I alluded to before, I think AI is bringing all these awesome opportunities, but it also makes things more challenging and
Hmm.
um, you know, creates new challenges constantly as well. So it can be
Hmm.
kind of all at the same time.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, especially with AI as well, like, I don't even think we fully know and understand the full scope of it yet, too. Like, everyone I
Sure.
pretty much speak to, in the market, whether that be kind of active talent and just generally anyone in the cyberspace is kind of saying, I want an element of AI in my next company, or, I want there to be, AI in some way or form. But I think, as you said, like, it's great in so many ways, but at the same time, I don't even think, we don't even know the scope of it, and what that will look like now as opposed to a year could be completely different as well.
Yeah, I'm sure the challenges and opportunities that we're talking about right now are going to be like those will be solved, and we'll have new ones that we're talking about just in a
Oh,
couple.
100%. And yeah, I just don't, we definitely don't know the scope of things, which is crazy, to be honest. But how,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess taking AI out of it for a moment, how do you kind of, what do you kind of think are the main challenges at the moment in the AppSec space?
Yeah, I mean, we feel pretty good about the product and differentiation we're building. I think one of the challenges, not only in AppSec, but just across cybersecurity, is a lot of it is really kind of positioning and messaging and creating awareness for your buyers. It's a pretty crowded, like broad category, and we talked about like a little bit of the challenges of kind of the sub definitions, and we call ourselves application security.
Hmm.
Someone might say that we're in vulnerability management. They probably, I wouldn't say they're wrong.
Hmm.
Um, Put us in other categories as well, and I think that sort of confusion creates certainly a challenge
Hmm.
from a brand recognition and awareness perspective. And I always joke when you go to a lot of these large security conferences
Hmm.
or networking events, everyone in many ways they look the same, they sound the
Hmm.
same, like everyone's messaging is quite similar. And so trying to really kind of stand out and make
Hmm.
sure that your message is piercing through and get resonating with buyers is really really challenging. And so I think as hard as it is to build an awesome product and continue to differentiate there, it's as hard to make sure that companies are aware of what you're doing. And
Hmm.
I don't think that's changed in cyber. I think it's, if
Hmm.
anything, getting harder. And
Hmm.
maybe using AI for marketing is even making it harder. So everyone's using different things.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think I hear a lot of people as well kind of talk about that whole the product market and fit, and kind of, not even really, spreading themselves too thin in the sense of, going after so many different kind of markets. But I think it's good, as you said, you've seen the kind of gap with that mid-market element of things and are really targeting that. And I think a lot of kind of companies and spaces, might not necessarily have that full fit yet. So I think it's good that you've already just, seen that gap and thought, what, let's just focus on this, let's target on this, and let's really just kind of, see where that goes and the success of it really.
Yeah, that's right. It's harder.
Mhm.
It's harder to do than even the even yeah.
Yeah, no, of course. And I guess, as you mentioned at the start as well, this is, not necessarily founded this company, but you founded a company previously. So this is kind of, your second startup in a sense, but would love to kind of, dive in a little bit more on, your first company, how that came about and a little bit on that as well.
Yeah, sure. So prior to Inspectiv, with a couple of friends, we launched a company, Telesign, and Telesign was one of the early pioneers in consumer two-factor authentication. So I'm sure your
Hmm.
audience knows, everyone knows what that means now, but when we started, they certainly didn't. And
Hmm.
the idea of logging into an account, whether it was like your Gmail account or your Facebook account or any other account, and getting a text message with a code to verify your identity was pretty foreign.
Yeah.
And we were the launch partners with a lot of those companies to get that more and more mainstream.
Hmm.
And we kind of took that initial concept and then continued to innovate by building reputation scores and modeling insights based off of a user's phone number. So we could, probably the easiest example would be that a phone number that was on a reputable mobile carrier that someone had had in their possession for 15 years, which is quite common. People don't often just change their phone numbers, although in some markets they do, which is another sidebar. But like I said, a number that has been in possession of someone for 15 years on a high quality carrier, for us would have a potentially a better reputation than a phone number that was activated this morning
Hmm.
on a new SIM card on a carrier that's known for, like high, quantity, low quality prepaid mobile or like a Skype phone number
Hmm.
or a VoIP phone number. So we built that company over 10 plus years and
Hmm.
ultimately sold it. Um, I left the company about a year after that, and then actually rejoined and ran the company for
Hmm.
another 2.5 years, which was another fun ride. And
Hmm.
shortly after I left Telesign, actually probably like a couple within weeks,
Hmm.
I was introduced to Inspectiv, which was a pretty early stage startup at the time,
Hmm.
and got to know the company for almost about a year before being asked to join it and run it as CEO of the company.
Hmm. Amazing. Amazing. And I guess as well in terms of your own growth then at Inspective, where do you kind of foresee the company being this time next year in terms of, growth and just general overall kind of just yeah, overall company.
Yeah.
We'll cut that bit out, but well,
Yeah.
yeah, just overall growth.
I mean, it's sometimes we like to overcomplicate things
Hmm.
in seats, but really there's two things that kind of matter to continue to build value. One is we want to continue to grow revenue, and that means adding more customers. And
Hmm.
for us, that means adding, like finding new ways to have customers discover us, and we do a good job of reaching out to prospects, but we also want to create a better presence so that customers can find us and
Hmm.
um, can do a better job of explaining how we solve problems for them and whatnot. So that would be kind of one category, and then the other category is continuing to innovate and continue to provide differentiation and more value to those customers. And
Hmm.
some of the areas that we talked about on using AI to help assist with our ability to triage faster and scale the triage. The triage piece is one example, but those are really the two foundational, I think, areas for us. It's one, just acquiring more customers and providing them more value. And if we do those two things, a lot of other things tend to take care of itself. I think in my seat, there's a lot more that goes into it, but the more I can
Hmm.
spend time on those two areas, probably the better for value creation.
Hmm. Yeah, amazing. And guess like the last topic as well I kind of want to touch on is more of that modern take on security is kind of, that term has been floated around a little bit. So what would you kind of, what's your stance on a more modern take on security? And does that include kind of AI, or is there any other elements of that you would, potentially kind of like to talk about or foresee happening essentially?
Yeah, I think AI is a big part of that. I think for us, like where we sit, um, there's always a mix of like a small services piece with the product piece. And I think what we're seeing happen in a lot of different categories is like how can you almost like outsource a function? So
Hmm.
for example, a lot of startups will outsource like the CFO function until they get to a certain stage, meaning that they can, bring on a CFO type person that is managing uh, multiple companies and has a back end accounting team. And I think what we'll see with those types of services is that they're probably going to lean more and more on AI and get more efficient and be able to manage more.
Hmm.
I think similar things are happening on the security side as well, where companies will be able to outsource more of a function or more of a problem set. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll see a little bit more on somewhat on consolidation, but I think just in terms of like, hey, how can we scale this function? And are there vendors that are working fast and have evolved and probably using AI as part of that? Are there opportunities to leverage these types of teams to scale a function faster and probably cheaper than we can internally? And so I
Mm-hmm.
think when we look at like application security and why we like where we're sitting in the mid-market is that we can help a smaller mid-market company where application security is one of many challenges. And
Hmm.
some of the anecdotes I love here is like we've worked with companies that have 1,000 employees, and the person that's managing application security has so many duties that they also manage the key cards for remote access for their employees, and
Hmm.
they also manage like a piece of IT. They manage a ton of different responsibilities,
Hmm.
and so we can help those organizations ultimately scale without needing to add, teams of people or internal folks. And so I think we'll continue to see that where vendors are investing a lot in AI for specific use cases, and because
Hmm.
of that, that's allows companies to rely on these vendors to scale certain functions or maybe add a function that they weren't, didn't previously have.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, that I guess that ties back into AI again.
Yeah.
So
Everything, I think everything nowadays,
yeah,
especially within cyber and just the whole world, really, just everything now ties into AI. So
yeah,
it'll definitely be interesting to kind of see the evolution of that over the next kind of few years for sure.
totally, totally.
Amazing. Well, yeah, it was lovely to have you today. Had a really great discussion. And I think it'll be great to kind of, follow the progress and kind of, also as we have talked about, seeing the evolution of AI and essentially how, Inspectiv can help, especially with mid-markets, customers. So yeah, it was brilliant to chat and tune in next time for the next episode.
Yeah, it was really nice to chat, Emily. Thanks for having me on. And for folks that are listening that want to connect, you can add me on LinkedIn or and pretty active there, and would love to nerd out on any of this stuff. So happy to connect. And yeah, thanks again for having me on.
Of course, of course. Thank you very much.